Okay, bear with me. I love the Dutch culture so much. I have a Dutch bike tattooed on my arm. And so I'm going to try to say his name correctly. It's Richard van der Den. Yes, okay. Oh my God. Okay, so let me give you a little teaser for his talk. So backups are essential. Most people know that. But too often they're treated as a set it and forget it task until disaster strikes. And suddenly those backups are useless. We'll take a critical look at backup and disaster recovery strategies. Are your backups sufficient and really as reliable as you think? Through real-world examples, you'll get some practical insights. Everybody give it up for Richard.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. So, my name is Richard van Denderen, and I'm one of the organizers of WordCamp the Netherlands last year, 2024, and this year's edition, 2025. For that, the call for sponsors and call for speakers is now open, so if you want to apply to that, go to wordcamp.nl and apply. And although I've been volunteering for WordCamps, WordPress meetups for the last decade or so, this is my first time ever speaking on a WordCamp at this stage. And it's not that I'm nervous, but only because my grandma is also watching over the live stream. In my day-to-day job, I found a WP help desk, and with that, I mostly help end users solve their WordPress problems. And sometimes those issues also involve a developer, an agency, or their web hosting provider. And if they took care of their backups well, I would have been out of a job. And it's really strange because some things really stood out to me over the years. When you go out do your daily, weekly grocery shoppings, you take a lot of precautions. You know, you lock the doors, maybe close your windows, make sure the stove is turned off. And when you drive in your car, you wear a seatbelt, you take the speed limit into consideration, and you make sure you get there safely and get safely back. But one thing is not mentioned in that is the factor of time. Because even something simple as leaving the house is going to change tremendously when the amount of time increases. For example, if you go out on a road trip for 5 months, 6 months, just leaving your house and lock the door isn't sufficient anymore. But you would also, for example, do an extra maintenance check on your car, have someone watering your plants, and make sure no one is breaking in. And even then, you can have some shitty neighbors, and your house can go up in flames. Or someone is breaking into your office. Or, in a less extreme circumstance, hard drives, hardware can fail that host your important data. So an easy solution for that would be to use a NAS or a DAS in a RAID 1 or RAID 5 setup, so you have a couple of additional hard drives that can act as a failover when your hardware fails. But also RAID is not a backup, because when going back to that image of that house going up in flames, your hardware is not safe when your house goes up in flames. So let's go back with our data to the cloud. But can we actually trust big tech and our data in the cloud? There have been so many incidents over the last couple of years. It's a bit naive to just store your own data and your client's data in the cloud without giving it any second thought. I mean, we've seen some changes in the terms of service that all of a sudden your data is allowed to train their AI models. There was an incident with iCloud where deleted photos all of a sudden became undeleted. And, for example, Google Drive scans your files and can block your account without ever returning those data. And then there are accidents that happened like a couple of months ago with a major outage on the power grid in Portugal and Spain. Or you could just simply miss a payment and you lose all your data because your provider just shuts your accounts off. Or if you have everything properly documented and taken care of, a data center can caught on fire, and depending on the provider, maybe even the backups are stored in the same data center. Or just a few years ago, there was a heat wave in the UK, and the data center of Google and Oracle went offline because of their AC unit wasn't keeping up with the heat. And although it's 2025, still not all hosting providers even make backups for their clients or for you that you can use. When you're making backups, there are like 4 important parts to think of that not only apply to backups of your data, but also to your processes. First of all, the most important one would be to make sure that there are actually backups being made. Not all web hosts make backups. I've encountered some web hosting providers where their first-tier support didn't even know where those backups were located or stored. And, for example, when you use a plugin to make backups, it can happen that a plugin gets deactivated without you ever getting a notification that backups are no longer created. Then the second point would be the backup location. I assume most of you are familiar with a 3-2-1 backup strategy. The theory behind that is that there are 3 versions of data exist. 2 of those are backups, and 1 should be at least stored off-site. Backups at the same hosting provider are at risk, in my opinion, because when the web host is down, you can't access those backups. When your hosting accounts get compromised, your backups could also be infected. And so with the 3-2-1 backup strategy, I would advise to at least store both backups off-site and at least 1 on your own hardware. For very important data, you could also take some inspiration from our crypto bros with their cold storage and just have a backup on a hardware system that's not always online or connected to the internet. Then the third one would be backup frequency. For a very active web shop, a daily backup is not sufficient. You could lose like thousands of orders just within a couple of hours if you need to restore a backup from a day old. Well, on the other hand, for a very inactive website, let's say a brochure kind of website, having a daily backup is overkill because that content maybe changes once a month or maybe even every couple of months. So how do you navigate that? You can combine the backup frequency, how often you take backups, with the backup retention. How long are you going to store those backups? For the very active web shop, you could use a shorter retention period. Well, for a very inactive website, you could expand upon that retention period and, let's say, save those backups for a whole year, but just limit it to a monthly backup instead of a daily backup. Well, for the very active web shop, you maybe want to create a backup every 10 minutes of the orders and the users database, but for the files, a weekly or a daily backup would be sufficient, combining that with a staging and a development environment, of course. Then the most important part about your backups is to actually download and test them. And not only download and test your backups, but also your test and your restore process of them. Just look at them as a fire drill. You want to be trained and prepared for the scenario when you actually need them. I've talked yesterday to a couple of people here, and I gave an example about an issue that sometimes happens with backups, and they confirmed that they also encountered exactly the same, that when you have a very big website, let's say 100 gigabytes, a database of 10 gigabytes, and you need to restore that backup. You start downloading that backup from 100 gigabytes from your cloud provider, and all of a sudden you realize downloading that backup is going to take you 3.5 hours. And then you need to upload that backup, and it's going to give you an estimated time of another 4 hours. All of a sudden, your client's website is offline for a full day. Or when restoring a database backup, you realize that the backup plugin you're using can't handle a very large database to upload, or your hosting provider, the whole server goes offline because you're overloading it with those commands. You don't want to get caught off guard in that situation, but want to be prepared beforehand and also assess your processes for that to restore those backups. Then, a month ago or so, I saw a post in a Facebook group for WordPress professionals. There was a question asked, what is your primary backup solution that you're using? The results were interesting. About 25% of the respondents said they rely on their web hosting for backups. About 25% were relying on a SaaS solution for the backups, and about 40% were using just a regular WordPress plugin for the backups. And as already mentioned, your data center of your web host can go up in flames. Not all web hosts make backups, and not all know where those backups are stored. And if you have a serious outage and you rely on your web host for backups, their support gets flooded, you can't even access the backups of your web host. So relying on your web hosting for backups is not a good idea. I would say it's not even a good idea to rely on just one source for backups. For SaaS backup solutions, they are very nice. They have some positive add-ons to it. When such a service loses connection to your website, you get at least a notification, so you know a backup fails. But it's also a bit of a black box. You don't know what exactly happens with your data on the back end. You don't have control over its retention period most of the time. You have very limited control over the frequency of those backups, and you still need to download them to your own hardware and need to test them quite often to know very sure that those backups actually exist and are not just a single text line in an overview of that dashboard. Then there are also the regular backup plugins, I think we all know, that are plentiful in the WordPress repository. I would say those are seldomly good enough to rely on as your only backup solution. It's often resource intensive when those backups are going on the background. They can take a very long time, especially for larger websites. And while doing so, your website is going to get a performance hit because the server is busy creating those backups. And you also still need to configure them correctly to make use of external storage and that you get a notification when a backup fails or the plugin gets deactivated. So what possible solutions or alternatives are there out there? Well, first of all, I don't think perfection actually exists. There will always be some trade-offs between the amount spent, the ease of use, the setup, and the reliability of your backups. I think something we should all expand upon would be the 3-to-1 backup strategy. If the web host supports it, you should have their backups sent over to your own server, preferably in your own office or at home. Combine that with a SaaS backup solution, so you get notifications when a backup fails. And even if you have maybe one of those regular backups, backup plugins, you can use that for like small database backups that you send over to one of the many, many cloud providers. So in the end, you would have probably 4, maybe even 5 backups at different locations. That whatever happens, you will always have at least one recent backup. So when you've taken a look at your backup solution, your storage process, your test processes, have taken some steps in testing your backups, you have it all covered, hopefully. But what about your clients that depend on you? I've talked about not relying on the backups of your web hosts, but for your clients, you are their web hosting provider. You are probably the single source of single point of failure for them. How do you safeguard your clients from you? And it's especially important if you're self-employed or a solopreneur, because every so often someone reaches out to me and they have like are really in a panic because their developer disappeared or they can't get in contact with them. And sometimes they only discover this when their website goes offline. And then there's nothing much left to do. And it's worthwhile to think about this and have discovered, because it's your legacy. The first impression counts a lot, but the last one is one that people will remember. When your client's company falls apart because you're not responsive or something happens to you, that's something they will remember, and not all the great work you've done in the years before. I don't have a definite solution for this, but there are a couple of ways to buy yourself some time. In the scenario you just abandon your client, go no contact, ghost them, there's not much you can do. But when you pass away, there are a couple of ways to give your relatives some extra time to continue your business and, well, give them some additional time. You could have all the most important stuff on automatic payments, so services won't go offline within a couple of months. And also, as long as money is coming in on your bank account, that could go on quite a while. And make sure you have everything properly documented with a password manager and maybe a list of trustworthy people where to help out continuing your business. Another possibility is to decrease the dependency on you for your clients. You could have your clients pay for their own email and web hosting directly. You can register the domain names in their names, so at least they can file a dispute through ICANN or SIDN if you are not willing to help them anymore. You can send them one of those backups every now and then, so they have those in their own archive. And also maybe it's more for the web hosts. We've seen, like in the last years, you have an account holder for a web hosting company. You have contact details for the billing addresses. You have sometimes developer credentials there. Why not add an additional content or contact details for the actual site owner of the client, so that if the developer goes unresponsive, the clients can fill in a dispute to get their website back. So before everything falls apart, when was the last time you checked your backups and the processes? And if that's the only thing you take away from this talk, that's the first thing you do Monday morning, download your backups, test them, and time how fast you can change or restore those backups. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to take some questions right now, if that's okay. And there are mics right in the middle of the aisles. So you could go walk up to the mic and go ahead and ask. Yeah. And we do have one, so yeah, go ahead and get going.
Hi, Richard. Thanks very much for your talk. I loved especially the abstract slides. It was very original and very useful information. So circling back on something you said, that a backup can very quickly get to a few hundreds of gigs. I've run into this problem in WordPress specifically with the WP content uploads folder. Probably many in the room as well. So I was wondering if you have some sort of magic bullet solution for that.
That really depends on what kind of backup plugins or solutions you're using. The content, the uploads folder, you don't really need to backup all that data every day. I mean, your media files from 2022 aren't changing anymore. There aren't coming in any new files. So you don't need to backup every file every day and just have, how you say it, a more progressive backup solution to that. So yeah, just backup the upload files from this month or this week every day, and from the older months or years, maybe once a year, once a month. So you don't have a storage of hundreds of terabytes for a site that's 100 gigs. Does that answer your question?
Oh, yep, go ahead.
Hello. I have a little question. What do you think about layered backups? Because I have doubts about those. For example, having a plugin backup, but also having the host, the server backup. So I think, what's the point of the plugin if I could just use the backup of the server?
Well, I think every backup can fail at least. You should take into consideration the backup of your web host could also fail. So it's one of the backups, and if you add an additional backup on top of it, the chances are that both backups fail when you need them, and there are no backups at all, get reduced by a lot. So that's why I would advise to use multiple backup solutions.
Thank you.
Yes.
Richard, great talk. You mentioned progressive backups, so keeping a few backups and then having a bigger and bigger time period between old backups.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a specific period you would recommend? How many backups do I want to retain?
Well, for example, for the very small websites, like the brochure website, I mostly retain for my own clients backups for a year. But in practice, that is like 12 backups for each month, and then 7 backups for the last week. So that would be, well, 19 to 20 backups in total for a very inactive website. And yeah, for the web shops, not more than a month, because they are so active, problems also are discovered way faster than with an inactive website.
Good point, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, well, if you would rather talk afterward with Richard, you're okay to meet them
Yes,
at the cafe?
I'll be at the WP Cafe.
Okay, well, that's awesome. So that is pretty much the ending of this talk, but we do have a couple things to say. One, if you guys are going to the after party tonight, which is actually right here, actually you are going, so I should rephrase that. When you show up, you need to bring your badge, and if you don't want to wear it, just make sure you bring it. You don't have to necessarily wear it, but that is how you get in. Also, one thing that I'm very proud of in the way that I've learned to say stroopwafel, I know that makes you guys cringe, and I say it so bad, but listen, it's stroopwafel. Little bit. Yes. And I wanted to just totally like +1 on your call for speakers and sponsors for WordCamp Netherlands. I've been an organizer for 10 WordCamps, so I know how hard that is and how much you bleed, sweat, and cry over those events. So do apply to speak and sponsor. But we do have a gift to give.
Yes.
This
Thank
is your
you.
speaker gift, so you got to go swim in the Rhine with that.
Yeah,
Yeah?
definitely. Yeah, we Dutchies are really good swimmers.
Yeah, you are. Okay, well, everybody give it up for Richard.
No, thank you.